Creepy things happen before the grave.
There's a Clown Standing Outside My Window by HybridPumpkin. If you like today's story, then please check out the author's subreddit, HybridPumpkin, where he holds polls, exclusive stories, and general discussion about his work. There's a clown standing outside my window. When I woke up, just 30 minutes ago, I saw it. A disgusting, nightmarish face covered in bright makeup. Its face was caked with pale white, while his lips and the areas around his eyes were red. Sweat had accumulated on its face, causing the red makeup to drip, and it looked a lot like blood. His painted-on smile was unnerving in a way impossible to describe. Just a glimpse of it made my blood run cold. The clown's big eyes were rolled back into its head, showing nothing but white. Its hair was a tangled wig with curly bright red hair that fluffed up comically tall. A large, shiny red nose was centered on his face, gleaming in the dim light provided by my alarm clock. It was dressed in the stereotypical clown attire, atomically large green shirt coated with sequins, and baggy blue pants. The makeup had dripped onto its clothes as well, making it look as if the clown was covered in blood. The sight was terrifying, enough to make me scream. I'd been aroused by a noise coming from somewhere in the house. I'm a light sleeper, so this was normal, but seeing grotesquely painted clowns was not. The dark shadows that shrouded its figure served only to increase its atrocity. I live out in the sticks, where the nearest neighbor is a mile away, so screaming was useless. But that also arose the question, how did it get here, and why? To get to my house, he would have to have driven or walked several miles on a rough dirt track. Then, would have to walk another 100 yards along a gravel path that led to my house. No one would go this out of their way to scare me. I hadn't even noticed that I'd shut my eyes. I slowly opened them and was immediately greeted with the clown's sickening grin. The window he was standing at was parallel to my bed. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I run? Should I call the police? Thoughts raced through my head faster than bullets. Then I noticed that the clown wasn't moving, not breathing or anything, just standing there like a hideous statue placed directly in front of me, with the only thing separating us being a thin pane of glass. I sat there staring at him for at least 10 minutes, waiting for him to move. Just a twitch, a breath, a slight swing would at least verify that it was human. It was too lifelike to be simply a statue or a cardboard cutout. But then again, how could he be so perfectly still? Every human has to move a little, no matter how still they stand. This was impossible. I rubbed my eyes, thinking that this might be a dream or a waking vision. It was not. I even tried pinching myself, but the clown still stood there silently. I took a deep breath and shouted, "Get off my property, or I'm calling the police!" My threat came out sounding like a whimper instead of a shout. The clown still stood there, sweat still dripping down his face, but no other movement, no sign he'd heard what I said. I tried again. "Listen here, I don't know what sick joke this is, but you're trespassing on my property. I'm gonna call the cops if you don't leave right now." Again, the clown portrayed no acknowledgement of myself. He stared right at me, completely and perfectly still. Then I made a stupid decision. I stood up, slowly, carefully, pushing my bed sheets aside. I maintained a steady stare on the clown as I approached the window. Now, standing less than a yard away from it, it seemed so much more real and so much more terrifying. The sweat dripping from his face was clear. The makeup was splattered on his face as if he'd done it himself. Now that I was closer, I could see his teeth, barely visible from across the room. They were a sickening shade of yellow, with little bits of red seeping through between them, as if its gums were bleeding. I got as close as I could to the window to examine the clown further. Now I was able to look down even further, and saw 2 baby blue shoes covered in pink polka dots that were far too big for normal feet. On the ground next to him lay one of those bulb horns clowns normally carried. The ground around him was covered in red makeup that had formed a puddle around his feet. I wanted to vomit. Why was this clown here, and what did it want from me? Then I did something I truly regard as stupid and opened the window. I'm not sure why I did it. I figured I'd had nothing to lose, and I felt I needed to examine the thing closer. The sound of the window scraping against the sides of its frame tore through the silence like a knife. The cold night air entered into my house, causing me to shiver. I couldn't see much beyond the trespasser as he blocked most of my view. Now that there was nothing separating us, the silence was unbearable. I felt that at any moment he could grab me and drag me into the darkness beyond, and no one would know. I reached out, slowly, carefully, and grabbed the clown's baggy green shirt. It was real. As I pulled it up, its torso was exposed. It, too, was completely pale with traces of red makeup dripping onto it. I dropped its shirt. Then, I touched his face. It was skin. The clown was definitely not a statue. As I pulled my fingers away, a glob of white makeup came with them. I wiped it off on the clown's shirt. Throughout all of this, the clown remained still. He showed no signs of life. He did not blink. He did not twitch. He did not breathe. The only thing resembling life was the sweat that poured down his face. I slammed the window shut, unsure of what to do. I made sure the window was locked, then walked downstairs. I decided to grab a glass of water, then call the police. Then I could at least rest assured that help was coming. As the cool water rushed into the glass, I thought I heard something. Something that sounded like a shriek. It didn't sound quite human, but it didn't sound animal either. It's hard to describe the sound that I heard, and even so, the sound was obstructed by the noise of my sink. I turned off the faucet and listened. Nothing. Silence. Was it my imagination? Was my mind playing tricks on me? I couldn't tell. I sat down at my counter and drank my water. I wasn't in a rush, as I figured that he would stay still at my window, as he had earlier for heaven knows how long. Something fishy was going on, sure, but I'm 6'5" and weigh 240 pounds. On top of that, I have a black belt in Taekwondo, so if someone tried to mess with me, they would regret it. Then, I made the mistake of glancing to my right, at the window, because when I looked out at that window, I saw something horrifying. The same clown who was at my window earlier was standing completely still at that window, staring at me with wide eyes. It was leaning forward, hands pressed firmly against the glass. Its painted-on smile took on a whole new form of menacing in the shadows that danced around its face. I screamed again, startled by the sight. I ran into my living room where my landline was located. As I ran through the hall, I heard the shriek again, this time much louder and clearer, except now there was no other noise to obstruct it. I realized that it wasn't a shriek. No, it was something worse. A laugh. A sickening cackle, disturbing enough to turn anyone's blood to ice. I soon reached my den and darted to a small end table upon which sat my landline. I picked it up, quickly dialing a number I thought I'd never need to call, 911. But as I attempted to call the number, something bad greeted me. Something very bad. Something that jeopardized my entire existence. Silence. The line was dead. I tried to call my neighbors, but once again, faced with the dead silence, I began to panic. What was going on? Why was this happening? As I turned to run again, I tripped on something. I was thrown forward into the arm of my couch. The wind was knocked out of me as I lurched forward. I tumbled to the floor. A thud echoed around me. I looked back at what I had tripped on. The cord to my phone. It was cut in half by what looked to be a knife. Bits of wire were exposed on the fray ends. I stood up, shakily. Someone had been in my house. But where were they? Were they still here? With nothing else to do, I concocted a plan to save myself. I had no other option, it seemed, than to run away. I would exit via the back door, then run the full mile to my neighbor's house. He would let me in, and I could use his phone to call the police. It seemed like a long shot, what with the clown outside, but I had no choice. I turned to the living room window. The clown was standing there now, perfectly still, smiling at me with a sadistic grin. I slowly backed away, keeping a steady watch on him. I was beginning to think he only moved when I wasn't looking. The creaking of my footsteps on the hardwood floor were the only sounds to be heard. I continued to step back, slowly, cautiously, until I reached the back door. I fumbled for the lock and opened it. Now the clown was completely out of my vision. I spun around and took off into the night. As I ran, again, I heard the shrieking laughter of the clown as he pursued me. I didn't know how fast he was, but I ran anyway. I flew through the trees that surrounded my house. I soon lost all sense of direction, but I continued to move in a straight line, or so I thought. As I ran, the crackling continued, louder than ever. I was sure it had caught up to me, so I started making sharp turns to slow the clown down. However, each time I did this, the laughter got louder and faster. There were no pauses between each giggle. It never breathed or got tired. I flung myself back out of the woods and toward my house. I had ran in a circle. I spun around. The clown was standing completely still on the edge of the tree line. Continuing to stare at him, I made my way back into the house and toward my back door, which I left unlocked. To get to the door, I was forced to turn a corner on the edge of the house, meaning the thing would be out of my vision. As I did this, I sped up drastically as I reached the door. I turned around to grab the handle. I screamed in complete terror when I saw the clown right next to me, grabbing the handle as well. He was staring straight into my eyes, grinning maniacally. A light of insanity burned in his eyes. I leapt into the house. This was followed by another shriek of laughter as he followed from outside. I ran into my room and slammed the door, locking it. I looked out the window, and the shrieking stopped. The clown had stopped in the middle of opening my window. I slammed the window shut on his fingers, to which, of course, he betrayed no reaction. I'm writing this now, in hopes that someone will find this. Please send help. There's a clown standing outside of the window, and if I close my eyes or look away, it will attack. Please help. This clown isn't human. He can't be. Please send help.